Welcome. This is our second video in our series, Losing Weight on the Carnivore Diet. In our first video, we talked about why carnivore diet will work when nearly every other diet you've tried has failed. So today we're going to talk about what can I actually eat on a carnivore diet? Because this is a question that worries many people. The short answer is that the carnivore diet is an animal-based diet. That means that we eat animals and anything that comes from an animal. Now, of course, there are many variations of the carnivore diet, but what I tend to eat is just these four things here. I eat meat, eggs, salt, and butter. That comprises of pretty much the totality of my carnivore diet. Now, this is likely to be quite a dramatic change to the way that you have been eating, and it depends on what you've been eating up until this point on how you should start the carnivore diet. If you've been eating a healthy diet of whole foods, more like a keto diet or something similar to that, then the transition should be fairly easy and fairly smooth. If you're coming to carnivore straight off the standard Australian or standard American diet with all of its junk food and crap that we've been eating for years, then it might be wise to do some sort of a transition plan into carnivore. If that applies to you, I would encourage you to go back and watch a video I made a couple of months ago called Starting Right. And it goes through the various transition plans into carnivore, and it also has a downloadable worksheet on choosing the right transition plan for you. Now, when people come to look at the carnivore diet and discover that it's pretty much all meat, the first thing they often say is that meat is really expensive, and of course it is. And the price of meat is going up all the time, it seems. I think in Australia here, it's gone up 10% in the last year, and it seems to continue to rise. I think to balance that out is the fact that although you're buying meat and probably more meat than you did before, there is a whole lot of things that you are not buying. I find for myself and my wife, who are pensioners, that our food budget pretty much has not changed on carnivore to what it was before. We are spending approximately the same amount of money as before. We are spending more on meat, but there's a whole lot of things that we're no longer buying that we used to buy. Now, when choosing meat, I personally prefer the ruminant meats. That's the animals that have more than one stomach. And I'm thinking, particularly in Australia, we would think of beef and lamb as the primary two ruminant meats. And I guess that beef and lamb would make up pretty close to nearly all of my meat selection. But there's no reason why you could not add things like pork and chicken and seafood or venison if it's available. In Australia, we have kangaroo meat. Some people try that, but it's a bit tough and lean for me. But you can have any animal-based protein on the market near you. Now, you might be thinking that's going to be terribly monotonous just eating meat, but it's amazing how much variety you can have just eating meat. I did make a video earlier on about the variety that you can have eating meat. I will leave a link to that video above, and it's entitled Easy and Varied Menus on the Carnivore Diet. That video will go into some detail about how to add variety to your diet, even though you're just eating meat. So a couple of things to say about choosing meat. As carnivores, we like to choose the meat that is fatty. Now, I know this goes against a lifetime of being told that you're meant to have lean meat and you're meant to cut the fat off and you're meant to have a portion-controlled serve of meat. All of that is finished. We want fatty meat because fat is so good for you, which is the absolute opposite of what we've been told all of our lives. So choose a fatty cut of meat. As you look at it on display, look for the cuts of meat that you can see the marbling in, and you can see that lovely layer of fat on the edge of the meat. The second thing we want to say about choosing meat is I like to choose meat as close to the source as possible. In other words, I want fewer parties between the farmer and myself. I find it also an advantage to buy meat in bulk, in box loads, and there's quite a number of options there when you go that way. And it usually works out a bit cheaper too. and you get to shop less often than you would if you're buying meat every week. There's two great companies that my wife and I use here in Australia. The first is a company called Stockman Steaks. Now, this is a company that produces very high quality meat. They service a lot of the high-end restaurants right around Australia. I first came across them when they were recommended to me by Dr. Chafee, who's a neurosurgeon from America, but now based here in Australia, for which we are very glad. Stockman Steaks produce very high quality meat, and they put it into boxes in different formats. For instance, you can get a specifically carnivore box, or you could get a lamb box if you wanted lamb, or you could get a combination beef and lamb. So they've got quite a number of options there. They also have some Christmas options for Christmas coming up. The other company I've mentioned would be New England Lamb. And this is a farm gate company that sells lamb directly from their property. And this again is very high class lamb, and it can be delivered pretty much to any capital city or major town or centre in Australia. I will leave a link below both to Stockman Steaks and New England Lamb. If you use that link for Stockman Steaks, you will get 5% off your order. And if you use the link for the New England Lamb, you'll get $10 off your order. In both cases, it comes out about the same, because it's most of their boxes in both places are about the $200 mark, and it comes out to $10. It's not a lot, but it is better than nothing. So I would encourage you to have a look at those links and have a look at their websites and see if that's for you. Now, when you get all this meat, how are you going to cook it? Well, you need to be able to cook it, first of all, not in seed oils, as we've so often cooked in the past. So get rid of the oils and put them aside. Cook instead in things like butter or lard or tallow or ghee, any of these great products that are so compatible and so good on a carnivore diet. In my next video, I'll be going into greater depth on seed oils and the problem that they cause for so many people. But today I'm just saying put them aside and don't use them, and we'll get into more details on the next video. Now, in addition to meat, you can have other animal products on the carnivore diet. I'm thinking particularly of dairy products. Now, carnivores differ on how much dairy they include in their diet. Some have none at all and want to be purely meat-based. Others allow for a full selection of dairy. For myself, I just include a little bit of dairy. I use some heavy cream in my coffee, and occasionally I might have a slice of cheese. Now, when I say a slice of cheese, I mean that, literally a slice of cheese. I would never sit down to a whole plateful of cheese and just eat slice after slice. But I use cheese sometimes to accompany my cup of coffee, and that's entirely up to you on whether you want to include dairy and how much dairy you want to include. I've made a number of other videos that I will put links to in the description that answer specific questions about different foods that you might want to include or avoid on the carnivore diet. There are videos there on the subject of including fruit on the carnivore diet, avocados in particular. I've got a whole video on butter and the different types of butter you can get. I've got a video on dairy products in general where we look at the subjects of cheese and yogurt and cream and so forth. I've got a video there that opens up the subject of whether or not you include tea and coffee on the carnivore diet. And I drink very little tea, but I do have a cup of coffee occasionally, and I've made a video on that topic. And then finally, I've made a video comparing and contrasting the keto diet with the carnivore diet. They are very similar in some ways, but carnivore, I think, is perhaps best described as maybe a much stricter form of the keto diet. So that's about it. What are we going to eat? We're going to eat meat. We're going to cook it in tallow and ghee and butter or fat. In my next video, part 3 of this series, we'll be talking about some practical ways in getting started. How you actually get yourself set up and make a start on the carnivore diet. That's the next video coming up. I would invite you to join our Facebook group community, the Carnivore Pensioner. It's a great group where we share ideas and stories, very positive and affirming group. And I would also encourage you to subscribe to this channel. And if you click the bell notification, you're going to get a notification every time a new video is coming out. Now, this current series, Losing Weight on the Carnivore Diet, there will be 10 videos in the series, and they'll be pretty much coming out at the rate of 1 a day. So you can keep an eye out for them. There will be 10 in total. But thanks for watching today. I will see you on the next video, and until then, keep telling your story. Even if it's just starting, keep telling that story.